2, 1. All right, hi everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. The first thing I want to do, just 1 second, is do a recognition of the native land that we're on, which is Ohlone, Muwekma, and Chochenyo. And then the ceremonial quote for today's meeting is "The bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweetness of low price is forgotten" by Benjamin Franklin. And now I'll go ahead and do a roll call. So just 1 second. And I'll go from the top to bottom. So I have myself and then Brian Kilgore. If you could unmute, just say here so that I can make sure that you're able to fully participate.
I am here.
Thank you. Brian Gebhardt.
Here.
Thank you. Gerald Green.
Here.
Okay, these don't stay in order, so I'll have to jump around. Sharon Coco.
Here.
Thank you. Connie Tung.
Here.
Thank you. Trustee Jones.
Here.
Thank you. Eric Chu.
Here.
Thank you. Henry Fung.
Here.
Thank you. Michelle Hartman Gruber.
Here.
Thank you. Liz Fisher.
Here.
Thank you. Kelly McMahon.
Here.
Thank you so much. Malia Santos.
Here.
Thank you. And so that makes up 7 of, I believe, 9 appointed for now. So that is a quorum. It's a majority of those appointed. And so we can go ahead and get started. Unless there's any objection, I'd like to go ahead and adopt the agenda. Seeing no objection, we'll go ahead and adopt the agenda as is. Same thing, unless there's an objection, I'd like to go ahead and adopt the minutes for the October 7th, 2020 meeting. Either objections or comments are welcome at this point. Seeing none, I'll go ahead and adopt the minutes. And now we move to oral and written communications. So if you could give me a few seconds to just go ahead and pull that up. Okay, so there are no live comments. So there are no comments that were sent into FAC, the FAC inbox. All right, so let me go back to the agenda. We can now move to the staff update, and so I'll hand it off to Ms. McMahon. I mean, the list of items in there are as written, and it's kind of free form, so I'll just start with 25 minutes. Obviously, you're free to take less time. Otherwise, we'll extend if we need more time.
Okay. Thank you, Antonio. So if we go by the agenda, the first on the list is A, which is the application and membership recruiting. Since the last time we met, we have updated our website, and I believe that there is a fillable form application that's available online for members who are seeking to join the committee to actually fill out the form online and have a online signature and have it be submitted versus having to do the mail in or come in directly to the district office. So I have not had any applications other than the ones that were previously submitted at our last meeting since our last time we were together in October. But I don't know if Brian or Anita has had an opportunity to receive any new ones or additional ones at this point. Antonia, are you aware of any additional ones that have come through since that time?
No, there's none in the FAC inbox. And so just as a preview, there's approximately 5 applications going to the board. So that would help us, round out and fill the committee further. I believe there are 7 vacancies, however, so we would still have the opportunity to fill, that 2-year term that began in September. So we look forward to that.
Okay. The other thing that I was asked to bring forward to the committee this evening was the update of the bylaws. So currently our legal counsel and the superintendent's office, and I think I shared that with you and Brian, Antonio, about they want to eliminate the line item in the bylaws that states that the facility advisory committee members are required to fill out the Form 700, which is the identification of your assets and net worth and things like that, and to ensure that you haven't, used public funds for your, personal benefit, that kind of thing. And the strategy behind in having that modification made to the bylaws is to help encourage people to participate, because many times people see that and they're like, oh, I don't want to, participate because I'm not going to disclose, my personal financial information. And so by eliminating that, you guys will no longer have to be required to do that as part of participation in the committee. So we wanted to ask if that was something that would be okay with you all, and if you all would take a moment to discuss it, possibly take an action on it, and then I can report back to the superintendent's office that, whatever decision is that you guys come about with regard to that.
So unfortunately, that came up after we sent out the agenda,
Okay.
I believe. But one thing we could do, and so what is the timing on that, Ms. McMahon? When would
We
they
are
like that?
trying to take it for modification to the board on Wednesday. So we have other items that are going with the bylaws, but that particular item is sort of bundled with others. And so we were hoping just to get a response from you all. But if you all are not prepared to respond on that, we can, table it till December. But
No, I wouldn't say that. I just would say, like, we didn't put it in the agenda, so we might not be able to act on it. But I don't know that the board is the one that adopts our bylaws as it is. While we have the ability to push forward proposals, the board ends up, making that decision themselves.
correct.
So I don't know that we need to weigh in on that. And it seems pretty formulaic. So I don't see any, I mean, does anybody from the committee have any objection to the board considering it, or in reviewing their bylaws think that we need to approve it before it, comes back to us changed essentially? Yeah, so without objection on our agenda, it seems like it's within the board's purview anyways to do so.
Well, we just wanted to make sure you guys had an opportunity to discuss it. And if there were questions or comments about it, have the opportunity to do it before the action was taken. So it's definitely to your benefit. So we didn't want to overstep our bounds and make modifications without having a discussion with you guys.
I did have a question. Yeah, and as a committee of the board, it's their bylaws to the greatest degree. Are we no longer subject to the Political Reform Act? Is that a change in law? Do we know why we are no longer required to fill out Form 700?
It is my understanding that our legal counsel has advised us that this particular group would not be subject to that. So that's why they're recommending that be taken out. So it's just one less barrier to have to, have in front of participants to have them participate. But it's not really it's not a big have to. And so there's no legal requirement behind it. So that's why they went ahead and suggested it. Let's see. I'm just writing your question down, Antonio.
No, it's been a couple years, but I seem to recall that short of actually listing your assets and all of that, you could also check off a box indicating that you had no conflicts of interest.
Well, you still have to do the conflict of interest statement, but the financial piece is the part that's being removed.
Mm-hmm.
That might be a good reminder for us, especially once we welcome in new members, because I know that Form 700s were collected at the beginning of the last term or the last year. But if we're still having to fill out conflict of interest forms, which is good to do so, if staff could share that with us, that would be appreciated. So
Sure, I can,
um,
we're actually updating that as well, so
Right.
I'll make sure that you guys get that. I'm just writing this down. Okay, so that's all I have in terms of the application process and membership process for the committee. Are there any additional questions before I move on to item B? Okay, so the item B is long-range facilities master plan. So we've had a lot of progress since the last time we met. So at the last board meeting, we actually approved a consultant firm called AE3 Partners to work with the district in updating the long-range facilities master plan. So this week, we're actually in the process of executing their contract and dotting all of our I's and crossing all of our T's, and getting all the required have-tos out of the way so that that agreement can actually be executed within the next 2 weeks. They're going to begin the process of meeting with staff and beginning to lay out a roadmap. I know that there were some concerns that were expressed at the board meeting in terms of how the strategic planning would go, but I think this process that we're going through is what's going to establish what our strategic plan is going to be. So part of what they are going to be doing over the next month and a half, it's going to be kind of hard because, with holidays and the impending schedules of end of year consolidation, they're going to be working with us to begin to establish the various groups that are going to be working on the strategic planning of what we want as a district for the master plan. And so part of what they are doing right now is they're taking the old master plan and going through it forensically to see, hey, these are the things that we've accomplished. This is done. It's no longer an issue. These are the things that were kind of worked on, but not fully executed. And these are the things that were not on the top priority list. So now let's take all of that stuff and put it in front of us and then begin to basically look at it to say, hey, this is where it was then, this is where it needs to be now, and begin to have those discussions and begin to do the analysis of each and every site within the district that has not had any level of modernization or deferred maintenance within the last 4 or 5 years. And so once they compile that information, then we're going to basically, this group, the Facilities Advisory Committee, is going to be part of the group that will then do an analysis of that data to then look at a similar process of how you guys went through the prioritization before, and looking at, the needs and identifying exactly, what direction we want to go in terms of how we prioritize the work. And, there's just a whole host of things that will occur, but that is a process that we are starting. So I'm happy to report to you all that we've pulled the trigger, and the train is getting ready to move on that. So just wanted to take time to acknowledge that. Are there any questions before I move on to item C?
Go ahead, Brian.
Well, to start with a comment, there may turn into questions, but yeah, this is a huge step forward and hugely important. And so I think the long range facility master plan was a huge effort in 2014, and I was a member of both the executive steering committee and the main committee. So I'm very interested in how this is going to be, what the process is, what are some of the principles, are we going to update our standards for schools as well? I think those are very interesting questions. And the timeline. I know I don't remember how long it took, but it wouldn't surprise me if this can take quite some time to do well. So
yeah, well, it's definitely not going to happen in 30 days. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, I think I don't remember, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was 6, 9, 12 months last time, right? It's a big effort to do it well.
Yeah.
And I think it actually is a much more difficult plan this time because we have to deal with declining enrollment and many other things, you know. So yeah, so I'm hoping, like I said, I don't know how fast it's going to move, but I'm hoping that the process and the standards and the roles and responsibilities may be something that we can agendize next agenda for FAC.
I will put it on my list of things to make sure that we identify and address.
Whereas that assumes there's others on FAC that support adding that agenda item.
It does. Let's bring it just for my benefit. It's exactly what, Brian? And obviously we'll discuss it under next steps, but
Well, you know, a process, timeline.
well, yeah, if you
roles
type
and
it out, then we
responsibilities.
can certainly address it during next steps. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, we'll address it on that when we get there. Yes.
Awesome. Thanks. Kelly?
Okay. So on to item C, if there's no other comments on the long-range facilities master plan. So item C is the 7-Eleven Committee. And so this is another great thing that I want to report out on, that since the last time we've met, we actually have a 7-Eleven Committee, and the 7-Eleven Committee has actually met 3 times. And so it's pretty exciting. I've enjoyed meeting the members, and the main thing that we have done over the last few meetings is to, one, do a historical perspective of all of the properties in the district that are eligible for surplus. The board actually gave us a task of specifically looking at Marshall site as a priority to look at surplusing. And we've been fortunate enough to have our legal counsel of DWK and Karina Sanmiego work with us to basically educate us on what our abilities are legally to dispose of any properties. And then she's also been helpful in providing, I guess, the status of the properties that the district currently has that have been undeveloped. And so over the next week or so, we're going to be looking at creating a, I don't know, next steps to look at Marshall specifically and come up with different options of how that property can be utilized or surplused. And so, Liz, do you have anything to add that I've forgotten or have missed in that summary?
We are waiting to find out if state funding was used for the Marshall site, because that does affect what kind of money we get out of it and how we can dispose of it or surplus it if that's the case. So that's pretty key information.
And we have another consultant who's working with us to do a financial analysis for us of leasing versus sale and, you know, life cycle costing of that site. So we can definitely have an informed discussion and conversation about that site. And once Marshall is completed, we also will be looking at the horse property as well as the, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank. The
Patterson Ranch?
Thank you, Patterson Ranch.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, I see the sign, but it wasn't coming. So, but I apologize. But those are the next 2 that we will also evaluate within the committee after we finish evaluating Marshall. So that's the only update I have on that particular item. Are there any questions with regard to the 7-Eleven Committee at this moment? Okay, on to item D, which is the capacity report. So I believe I had forwarded you guys a copy of the capacity report when it was completed, I guess at the beginning of the summer. We have since updated that report, and the update was precipitated by a discussion that we've had with the Mandarin Immersion Program and the Spanish Immersion Program. When we were looking at the capacity numbers and we had several principals on the call, they realized that the reporting that they had provided to the facilities department was actually incorrect. And so we have since gone back and reevaluated all of the schools and the current capacity of what it is that they are using their classrooms for. So when they initially gave us the numbers for the capacity report, they were just including, oh, I've got 55 classrooms and one multi-purpose room. And what they were missing was that we needed to have clear identification of spaces, because part of the challenge that we're having with the Mandarin Immersion program is they want to take their computer labs and actually turn them into classrooms. And so we've been having discussions and educating them on the minimum California Department of Education requirements for schools and the allocation of specific spaces and what we're allowed to use specific spaces for. And so in doing that, the principals said, oh, well, wait a minute, that's not how I identified my rooms in the capacity report. So I have to update that information. So now we have the correct information, and we've redone and revised the capacity report. So I have and I'll share this with you guys. The report is huge, but I'll be happy to share with you guys just the summary page, and you guys can see, and I can walk you through. So when you do have the actual document, you'll know exactly what you're looking at and not have any questions. So I'm going to share host disabled participant screen sharing. So Antonio, can you let me share again?
Did you make me host?
I did.
Okay. Let me. Does that work? Try now.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Let's
If I
see.
may ask,
Yes.
is this on our drive? Can you provide a link to it in the chat?
Yes, I can. This particular document is not in the drive, but I will forward you guys a link for the drive when we do the minutes. So
Okay.
this is actually on my hard drive, but I know that it is in the G drive, but
Okay.
I don't have it open in that right now.
And just a quick question, Kelly, does this need further revisions, or is this an interim draft?
This has been fully revised and verified. So this is the report that we're actually also sharing with the MID and SIP programs on, I believe, Monday. And this is actually going to the board in a board update this week. So they will also have a copy of this report. So this is the revised report. And so just taking a quick cursory review, here you can see, looking at American.
I'm not seeing your screen.
Oh, you're not seeing my screen? Let's see.
Is anyone else seeing the same issue? Because I do see it. So is it only?
I see it. I see it.
I see it.
Okay. Let me go back to the document. So you guys see it again?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the cover page. So this is the first page of the summary. So here in this column, it says max capacity. And what that means is that is the maximum load of students that the facility can hold. The next column is program capacity. So what that means is that's the maximum number of students that can occupy the facility based on the programs that are being offered there. So whether it's a high school, middle school, elementary school, pre-K, or a special program similar to Rick Sklankler, that's what that number represents. And then the last column that says current loading, that is the current enrollment of students that are present at the school as of October 30th. So as you can see, when you look at the max capacity in comparison to the current load, initially looking at it at a glance, you'd be like, oh my gosh, that's a huge deficit. So there's lots of room there. But when you then go to the program capacity and then look at the current loading, then you can see now what closer apples to apples comparison, because the difference between the max load and the program takes in account your music rooms, your libraries, your computer spaces, your counseling offices, your special ed rooms. If there is a special STEM or STEAM program, or if you have a CTE program that has a specific space dedicated to, like, like a wood shop or a 3D lab or an art classroom. So an art classroom is actually classified similar to that of a multi-use space, because you have sometimes maybe half the room might be an actual area where there's a kiln or different tools that are used for teaching, but then the actual classroom space might be a smaller section of the same room that is, the students are at large desks where they're in a group or something. So those spaces had to be pulled out, and as I said, any special day classes also had to be pulled out, because those are counted very differently. So what you have here now is the actual true comparison of program versus current loading, and the delta between that is what you want to look at, and not looking at the max capacity load. And so in particular, we were looking at Azaveda, because that's where the Mandarin immersion program is, and they were saying, hey, we've got space, because they were looking at their max capacity load versus their current load. But then when you look at their programming and their current loading, you can see they do have some space, but they don't have a lot. And so looking programmatically at what they wanted to do and then doing the number calculation, they would not be able to accommodate some of the plans of what they wanted to do within the current structure that they have. So that's how this tool is being used. And it will also help you all in your evaluation as you look at overloading of how and where what schools have what ability to accommodate how many students at each site. So I hope this is helpful, and it will yield some good results for you. The other document I wanted to share with you all, we did do an actual overload report, which I got from Student Services. And this is an overload report that shows all of the overloads district-wide. And as you can see here, you have all of your sites listed on the left, and then you have your site name. This is your site ID number. And then the number of overloads incoming for 2019-20 is listed in this column. The number of overloads going out of that particular school is listed in this column for the school year of 19-20. The next two columns are for 20 and 2021. So this column here is the current fall numbers that we have for incoming for particular sites that are being sent to those sites. And then the next column is the outgoing students that are being sent away from their home school for that particular site. So as you can see, let's take Ardenwood. Ardenwood is sending, so last year Ardenwood sent 26 students to another site. In this particular school year, they sent 35 students out from their school site. And if we go all the way down to, and oh, I'm sorry, the attendance areas are also on your left-hand side. So if we go to, I know there's always discussion about Parkmont. So Parkmont is all the way down here. And so Parkmont, that's this one that I've highlighted. So Parkmont had no incoming overloads for 19-20, but they sent 213 students away from their school for last year. This year for 2021, they had no students that were transferred in, but this year they transferred 149 students out to different schools because they weren't able to accommodate them. So this is another very useful tool for you all in your analysis that you were talking about before of looking at overloads and how you can see where there's space and where there's not space for students. So
if I may, Kelly, so we're out of time, so I'll take a motion to extend time. And if you, I know that there are 2 people in line who want to ask questions, so if I could hear a motion from them. And then Kelly, how much time do you believe you need outside of any questions? Sorry, you're on mute. You're on mute. Kelly, you're on mute.
I probably just need 5 more minutes.
Okay, so that's for the general update. Okay, so 5 minutes, probably plus another, let's go with 5 minutes to answer the 2 questions. Do we have any objections to adding 10 minutes to this agenda item?
No objection.
All right, seeing none, I'll go ahead and add 10 more minutes. And then let me, I can't tell who was first, and I've heard from both of you, so I'm just gonna flip a coin. All right, Liz, it is.
Okay. Okay, so a couple of questions. Now, I know that when we put together our SFNA, and that provides exhibits of our eligibility for state funding, part of which is to show that we have a need for more capacity. And in the exhibits at the end of that report, typically they'll show the, what is it, SAB 50-10, 50-20, 50-30 or something like that. Those 3 reports. One is a capacity report. And then there's also a projection report. Unfortunately, I've noticed that some of these SFNAs will have copies in their exhibits that go back to 2008 when Therese Gaines was our facility manager, and showing capacities for like 33,000 or thereabouts. I'm assuming that's program capacity. And yet, surely we've had some portables or other kinds of things that may have changed that number over time. The last projection report that was in our exhibit from the March 2020 SFNA was one that John signed in 2018. And at that time, we had pretty stellar projections for growth. That they want to see a 10-year out type of projection. And at that time, it was 44,000, which is much higher than what it's currently being projected at. So I'm just wondering if our capacity reports and our lower projections, if that's going to negate our eligibility all in all.
Well, we have a consultant that we've just hired who's going to help us with our SFNA reporting that we're required to do this year. And they're in the process of reviewing the latest demographic report, as well as this revised capacity report. So I don't have an answer for you until they finish their analysis, but I'm sure we probably will see some level of change. How significant that will be, I don't know. But I do know that we are in the process of working with school facilities consultant. I just met with the associate superintendent and superintendent today, where we went over the state allocation board forms for several of our projects that are in line to get funding from OPSC. So those are very up to date and very current in terms of what we are reporting. So once we have that finished, you all will definitely have an opportunity to review that information and find out what the results were. But I don't have an answer because we're in the process of doing that right now.
Right. And if I could just tag on to my question, when we put in 2014, some of our initial, projects or thereabouts, I don't know when we actually completed and submit our final figures, to the OPSC and the SAB. But at that time, we were still projecting growth, and obviously we've pulled the trigger on our own GO bond to accommodate. Does the state look at our current situation and say, oh, sorry, we can't match you now?
That's a very good question, and I don't know, but I will find out. Because as I said, we're in the process of updating a lot of information right now, because a lot of information has been outdated. So I have a meeting, I believe it's next Thursday, with school facilities consultants to specifically talk about this. So I'll have better information to be able to share with you, to be able to answer that question. I feel bad because I'm not able to answer it right now, but
Okay.
we're doing our best to update and get as current as possible. So
Thank you. I won't take any more of your time. But thanks.
no worries.
Mhm.
No worries.
Sorry, Brian, there's no more time for your question. No, I'm joking. Go ahead, Brian.
So a couple questions on the overload report. And I asked this just to confirm it, but this is just the overloads. This doesn't include the transfers, such as,
No, does not include transfers, only overloads that are inter-district, inside the district.
which is excellent to see. And just a remark, I think that picture will change dramatically when we have all the middle schools completed and the additional capacity.
And that is actually another analysis that we've actually started as well, Brian. I've met with all of the principals, and we're basically numbers crunching to see kind of, these are all the elementary schools that are feeding into the middle schools, and then looking at exact counts so that over the next 2 years, we have a very clear picture of what those numbers are going to look like, to make sure that, one, the middle schools have appropriate capacity, but also what those elementary schools are going to look like, and where those overload numbers can be shifted and kind of, as you said before, leveled out or optimized. So I'll also have more information for you very shortly when we finish that analysis as well.
Oh,
If
excellent.
I may make
The
one
other-
comment.
Hey.
Sorry, go ahead.
The other thing I wanted to ask, is there a definition of program capacity in the report? And the reason I ask that is it's such a tricky thing. When you mentioned that special ed classrooms aren't part of program capacity, there's more follow-up questions than I think we should spend time on today, but that implies to me that there's a separate process. We need to make sure we're planning for special ed capacity. And it makes sense.
Absolutely.
And so, and I know that's been a point of confusion, I don't know, for the 20, 30 years I've been doing this, program capacity has been a point of confusion. So
I'll be happy to get the definitions from CDE for you guys, so that we're very clear on how they're defining their terms for the different spaces.
and if that matches what's in the report and how the principals filled it out, I think that would be helpful.
I think it will provide a wonderful education for you all. So I'd be happy to share that.
Thank you.
And we have 3 minutes left so that Kelly can complete her report. I'd ask for 2 more minutes from the committee, given that she had estimated she needed approximately 5 to finish the general update. So are there any objections to filling it out to 5 minutes? All right, hearing none, I'll reset the timer for 5. Go ahead, Kelly.
Okay, so in general, oh my gosh, there's so much stuff that we've done over the last month that my mind is racing right now. I had a really nice little list of things I was going to share with you guys. So I reported out to the CBOC. We had several board actions that we had at the last meeting. So we have awarded CM services for Kennedy High School. So Kennedy High School is in design development and is actually moving along really nicely. We haven't encountered any major problems from DSA, let's knock on wood, so far, but that's not to say it's not coming, but we've done a pretty good job in preparing and addressing a lot of the challenges that we had in the other projects and incorporating those into this before we've actually submitted to them. So we're hoping that helps us. The other really awesome thing that's happened is that the Thornton Middle School project playfields are almost complete. So if you guys have an opportunity to drive past Thornton and go check out the playfields and the infrastructure for the new building, you can actually see the outline and the perspective of what the new campus is actually going to look like. So that was pretty exciting. We did procure services for relocation management services. So, and what that entails is that we have a consultant who's going to be on board now that is going to be specifically focused on handling the transition for the instructors from the old building into the new building and preparing for that. So we had a lot of hiccups, I guess, with the other projects, and a lot of things got misplaced. There were things that didn't happen. Teachers weren't happy, principals weren't happy. And so now we have a team that's actually going to be totally dedicated. That is all they're going to focus on, is managing that process for us of logistics, furniture procurement, and execution of that work. So we'll have a seamless transition for staff and students as they go from one old facility into the new facility. Fortunately, nobody's on campus right now, but we know that that's not going to always be. But so when they are, there will be process and procedures in place that will help them transition smoothly and not have the same mistakes that we had over the last few projects. The other thing that is great is that, where did it go? Oh, we awarded increment 2 for block construction, which is actually the construction of the new building. So over the next 30, 60 days, you guys will actually start to see structural steel going up for the 2-story structure at Thornton. So we're pretty excited about that. And that's all my, oh, and then Horner is going to be wrapping up and closing out, hopefully, cross our fingers, hold our breath, by the end of December for the new structure and main building. So we are going to plan on having our CVOC meeting in November at the school and hold it in the multi-purpose room so that we can, of course, social distance and have ample space for everyone to sit. But we're going to give a tour of the school, and I would like to invite you all as well to come from 4:30 to 6 o'clock. And if that is something that you guys want to do for this committee, we can schedule another day to actually have a tour for this group separate, so that we can always maintain our social distancing for the tour. But I just wanted to share that with you guys and let you know that everything is moving along really nicely. And we've had no accidents. We've had no instances of COVID within the contractors. And I can't say we haven't had vandalism, because we have had lots of that, but we are getting a handle on it and addressing it as those items pop up. So, and that's my report.
We have 50 seconds. Liz? Liz, you're on mute.
What's going on at Centerville? I see stuff going on in the street, and it's got a fence around it.
So the city of Fremont and the Alameda County Water District are actually working on improvement of the water lines and new tie-ins. And we just happen to be right next to it. So that's their work, but it will impact our project because they're doing the upgrades that will help us when we do our additional work when we start Centerville's project. But Centerville is also moving along really nicely, and knock on wood, we are right on task with everything that's necessary for them. But that is what's going on. It's actually the city of Fremont and Alameda County Water District that are doing work in the street and along the sidewalk adjacent to the school.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Kelly. Appreciate the updates and the committee discussion. We'll now turn to the liaison reports and the discussion. I know that there's been a bit of work at the MIP SDI within that task force. Sharon and Kelly, are you also on that task force? Okay, so could Sharon and Kelly please update us? 2 items being kind of the expected timeline of the work, and then any potential partnership efforts for FAC.
I'll start, Kelly. You jump in and fill in whatever I might be missing. A lot of the conversations that we had at our last SDI MIP meeting had to do with capacity report, schools that had low enrollments, the difference between, as Kelly was explaining, the current load, the program capacity, and the maximum capacity was something that had a lot of discussion. And so I think this new updated report, which Kelly will be bringing back to our upcoming meeting next week, is going to be helpful. Some of the things that Kelly shared, I hope I report this correctly, is that she talked about Hopkins Junior High, and that they may not be able to accommodate the expansion of the immersion programs once the school is converted to a middle school. So there was a little bit of discussion about that, but it was basically, it was a heads up for us to give us the information that this is likely to occur. So Hopkins is projected to open in the fall of 2023, which sounds like a long ways away, but it'll be here before we know it. And so we'll be getting some enrollment information on the SDI projected growth and homeschool enrollment of the English only students in the programs at Grimmer and Blaco, and look at an updated low enrollment school list. So there's lots going on, lots of information to take into consideration in talking about the next steps for both of these programs to do it adequately.
Kelly, do you have anything to add?
Actually, the other thing that I'd like to add in terms of identify partnerships efforts. So one of the things that was discussed also that Sharon had explained very well is that when we were looking at the capacity of Hopkins and looking at the expected enrollment of the Mandarin immersion, the discussion was brought about that there needs to be a second site, and there needs to be a program discussion of, if there is a second site, how is the program going to be divided or set up so that it is successful? And one of the things that was discussed was looking at taking Azaveda and making that into a K through 2 or 3 program, and then taking whatever the secondary site, which is, I think, and I always say this incorrectly, either Blackout or what's the other school? There were 2 schools that we identified that yes, Vallejo Mill, where you could then take the 3rd through 5th graders. And when you do that, you have the ability to basically open up 5 to 7 classrooms at each site where you could handle the expansion of the programs as they're growing at the kindergarten level. You now have growth and opportunity to basically expand and double in your amount of classes that you offer if you do that. And so everybody kind of was like, well, we kind of understand it, but instruction is going to come back and have a much more in-depth discussion, because they wanted to kind of drop the seed of interest and let them know that that's an option. But we on the facility side have to make sure that if that is something that they fully evaluate and vet, that the facilities will be able to accommodate and actually support the program if that's something that is chosen to do. Lila Bringhurst was discussed as an option, but at that time I said I wasn't willing to put that on the table because we hadn't formally accepted the school. And so now, since we have conditionally accepted the school, we have an opportunity to actually discuss opportunities of what to do with Lila Bringhurst with regard to the MIP and SDI programs. So I think that's a worthwhile discussion for this group to also participate in and look at how that can help with the initiative that you talked about before of looking at district-wide, how we're leveling out all of our students and our loads so that everybody is, there's equity in terms of size and program and things like that. So.
Brian?
I have a few questions, and well, first I have a comment. I wanted to thank staff for putting all the Mandarin immersion information online, which made it much easier to follow. And I think it actually is going to be a broadcast / recorded in the future. So I really appreciate that. Excited about the projected student numbers. I think that is actually critical to modeling. So I can't wait to see the projected student numbers. That'll help us all narrow down the options. In the materials in the last meeting, there was a PowerPoint that talked about Blakeow that will increase from an available seats of like 587 to an available seats of 755. And I didn't understand that. So, and it seemed significant enough that it would be worth understanding. And so that was a question I had.
So for Blackout, currently they have the Rick's Glankler preschool at their site that occupies 5 classrooms. So when the new Rick's Glankler site is complete, they're going to leave Blackout and move into their own facility. And so that frees up basically half the school to actually have regular K-5 instruction in those spaces. And so if you take, I believe kindergarten is 24, and then 1 through 3 is 28, and then 4th graders and 5th graders, I think, is upwards of 30 or 32 students. So when you just do quick math, we just added the amount of each grades that would be able to be opened up. And then you jumped from the 500 plus to the 755.
Thank you. The Rick's Glankler, I'm not as familiar with that. That's what I did. That's what I needed to know. And then on the timeline, from what I was reading, that there's a short-term goals and timeline around a couple additional classrooms for the Mandarin Immersion program, and then the SDI location. And I wanted to understand if there was a target timeline for the short-term goals.
I believe, Sharon, aren't we supposed to come up with those this coming meeting? I believe there was a brainstorming session, and we kind of like threw a bunch of stuff up on the page. And I believe we're supposed to kind of whittle those down and prioritize and come up with the short-term goals and / long-term goals. So the short-term will turn into long-term / permanent, solutions. And then in terms of, what was your second part of the question, Brian?
Just the timeline for those decisions.
So
I'm
our
curious when
goal,
FAC has to.
right, our goal is to have, I guess, Christy, Dr. Rocha said that we have to have a report back to the board, I believe by sometime in March or April. I know it was before spring break. So that was the goal, was to have whatever plan solidified and vetted by that time.
Okay, so then we need to plan to agendize that in FAC January, February, or something like that.
Okay.
Sounds like, so we can review. Okay, yeah, no, super excited to see those numbers though, because those projections will be very, very helpful. Thank you.
Liz, go ahead.
You're welcome.
Okay, so you mentioned Lila Bringhurst came up in the discussion, and there is that mitigation agreement, and my understanding is the developers have reserved that school for themselves for some period of time. I don't know, maybe it was 15 years or something to that effect. If I don't know what sort of accommodations they make for special programs, which would basically be bringing in people from around the district into that school. Is it even feasible that could?
That is all going to be part of the discussion that we're having. So there's no definitive answer to that. We are aware of the mitigation agreement, and we're aware of what our numbers are in comparison to FUSD versus developer kids. And what I can share with you all is that the developer is not performing to the level in which they had told us in terms of the level of enrollment. So I think as of September, we're only anticipating like less than 80 kids this coming September. So we're already into, the year 2 of, what was expected. And we're not seeing the numbers that they had promised, which leaves the door open for us to, it's our school. And yes, we do have a commitment that we have to reserve a certain amount of spots, but our agreement does state that those students who attend Bringhurst or who are in that development are not necessarily going to be assigned to Bringhurst. So they're part of that whole attendance area. So it's wide open as to who or what can go there. So we've left ourselves a lot of flexibility in terms of what we're able to do. But I don't really have the ability to share much more than that until we finish the negotiations and fully take ownership of that site. But all of those things have been discussed.
So we're out of time. Brian, do you have a follow-up?
If I may just 5-second comment, just encourage the committee to also be aware that they should look at K through 5 as well, because in the long term that we're going to be K through 5, and that'll change the capacities of the schools pretty dramatically. So we should be very aware of that in this analysis. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. So now turning back to our agenda. And so now I'd like to move to facility needs in light of reopening. In part, I touched on this briefly with Kelly. We were not aware of the specific plans as to facilities. I know that at the prior meeting, we did discuss ventilation specifically, but given that the board will be discussing a potential reopening on November 12th, or at least they've asked for that, it might be a good time for FAC to start looking at this subject. As far as I know, just so that everybody has the same information, as far as I know, there's been no reopening of the larger task force on reopening that included the sub-task forces dealing specifically with facilities. And let me hand it off to Kelly and maybe Trustee Jones if she'd like to weigh in. But then I'd like to open it up just for a wider discussion of things that we are thinking about from a facilities perspective in terms of readiness.
Trustee Jones, I defer to you if you have anything right now. Okay.
I don't think I do. I think I still have a lot of questions just about what the state and the county are requiring versus recommending, and it's hard to say. I think until we have even some idea about what scheduling is possible, because we have to be able to integrate any sort of in-person cohorts with any students who will be continuing with full distance learning, and how that looks in terms of scheduling and how many students we'd actually potentially have at a site at any given time is it's just huge.
It's a big question mark.
Yeah, it's a big question mark, and it keeps me up at night.
Well, the one thing that I can share with you all with regard to the facilities and readiness, we had a very extensive meeting today with our M&O team, facilities, the superintendent, the associate soups, and we are definitely employing a plan of action where we're assessing all of our sites and prioritizing those that have really good air quality and meet the standards that are in place right now that have been specified by the county, and those that fall short, really identifying what do we have to do and how quickly do we have to do it, so that whatever decision is made come for spring, we actually have viable and cohesive spaces that people can occupy for a period of time based on whatever model is decided upon for instruction. So we are addressing that, and we're looking at the Christmas holiday to really kind of use that period of time to ramp up and blow through a lot of work that is necessary for us to address specifically the air quality of the facilities district-wide.
Yeah, I would say that however we proceed, there may come a point when the county or state mandates that we return. So we really need a plan in place so that we can implement it quickly. What I would hate to have happen is for us to, think that we will maintain complete local control. I mean, if we do, we do. But if we're assuming that we're going to be the final word about this for the rest of the school year and don't proceed with making a plan because, the board doesn't feel comfortable opening it all, that may not be a position that we can maintain depending on what the state and county do.
Sure.
So we really need to move forward with a reopening plan so that it's ready to go when either the board decides we can go back safely or the state or county says you are going back.
And that's one of the reasons why we're meeting and we're strategizing now and actually implementing various steps. So like, for instance, we have 2 consultants that are coming in this week that are looking at, room ionizers to offer support to the HVAC systems that are not going to be able to meet that maximum load of using the MERV 13 filters because the system is either just too old or it has outpaced us in terms of the price for us to fully replace it. So we're looking at all of those kinds of things and looking at how we can implement everything within a 30 to 45 day time frame so that when the holidays hit, we've either already employed and addressed an issue at a site that really needs assistance, or we've got everything in place that as we go through the holiday season and we come up on the first of the year, we are still actively employing and implementing things so that if and when students have to come back and even staff have to come back, they can come back to a safe environment and not have worries that if nothing else, we're meeting the county requirements and the standards of performance for air quality that they can feel. We can't guarantee anything, but we can at least know that we're providing a level of care that they can be comfortable in.
I think the one question I would have, and I know that there would be no answer, especially given how the process was handled when we thought we were coming back from summer, is what level of community involvement, or will it be district managed, like whatever plan is developed? And then would the community be involved at, the public comment stage of whatever is presented to the board? I think that would be great to know. And I hope that the board gives direction when they, consider this item, whenever it be. Any other questions from members? Otherwise, we can wrap this item up early. Okay, so seeing no other discussion, let's go ahead and wrap that up early. And let's move to thoughts on future meeting topics. Brian, I'll go to you first, since I know you had mentioned one earlier.
Thank you. Yeah, it was the long-range facilities plan process. And I'm going to list out a number of considerations, whether they all belong in one agenda item or not, or can be up for discussion, but I'd say it'd be helpful for the FAC to review the scope of the planning process, the timeline, understand roles and responsibilities and the FAC's involvement, review the core goals and principles to build the plan, review the plan assumptions, such as demographics, board target school sizes, etc. Understand if the facility standards are going to be updated in any way, and perhaps review the facility standards so we're aware of them. And then what's the engagement plan? student, staff, parent, community. I think those would be the process and foundation goals, principles, topics that I think would be important. And that was a long list, but I'm not saying it all at once.
Would you be able to give us context from the last LRFP as to those topics? Or is it too long ago?
It is a long time ago. I know that the consultant, had the scope and presented the scope to the board, probably after consultation with staff. So I would not be surprised one bit if that was part of the plan, sharing with the board what the plan is going to be. And there was a large community and staff committee of like 40-ish people. And then there was an executive steering committee that was a combination of staff and a few representatives from the from that 40-person committee that helped facilitate the agendas and the information that came to the bigger group. I'm certain the consultant worked with staff. The consultant also had short interviews with every school site where a principal and perhaps one or two representatives from that site would come to share what some of the priorities were for the site.
Sorry, I didn't mean now. I meant at the meeting.
I'm sorry.
Where we discuss it. No, I just wanted to make sure if you could give that color. And then Kelly, I may just need to coordinate with you. I'm hesitant to ask, like, are we interested in this? Because I would like the answer to be yes, given that we are the Facilities Advisory Committee. The question is just a matter of timing. Is this something that we want to focus on in the December meeting? If so, Liz, I see your hand. If you could lower it just so that we could get a check on interest in discussing it at this future December meeting, as described by Brian.
I want to make sure I understand the question. Can you just repeat it again?
Okay, so we have enough, given that we're smaller. Yeah, we have enough for agendizing it for December. My question was, so all the items that Brian picked, I want to reach out to you in between meetings so that we could coordinate whether we need to involve like the consultant, or should we, like defer more to people who were on the last LRFP in order to give us context, like who would be the best to present as to these items. That's all, but we'll coordinate that offline. Okay, so and then I'll go, oh, sorry, Brian, did you have something else? Otherwise, I'd like to go to Liz.
Oh, I'm sorry, just on that topic.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, well, and hopefully the committee agrees, as staff is developing its plan, if there's some adjustments that make sense, as chair and Kelly as a representative, you guys, can adjust what's appropriate, right? Like, so if staff and the people aren't going to be ready to talk about this in December, then it doesn't make sense. Or if they're only ready to talk about a few things, or if they have XYZ they'd rather talk to us about, right? There's certainly, I think latitude is what I would expect, but I was trying to think of what came to mind that I thought would be important.
Let me loop you into that thread and actually let you direct, just because you have so much experience in this topic with Kelly, so that we can plan for December. Does that make sense, Brian?
Happy to help any way I can. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks. And then Liz?
Now, Brian alluded to like possibly new facility standards. I'm not sure, how frequently such standards might actually change. The long-range facility plan is not that old. However, you had mentioned in the capacity reports that things such as art rooms and I would assume also music rooms and things of that nature, they're handled differently, if you will, when it comes to capacity and other things. So it seems to me that when we talk about facilities, we're not just talking about, is the lab big enough? But sometimes we may be talking about, do we want to have a district that is accommodating to more arts education, or, you know, maybe growing in the special eds services area as we are seeing that trend, you know, things of that nature. So, you know, it seems to me that there's a programmatic consideration when we're looking at long-range facility plan. And I don't know if your consultant is versed in some of the trends, educational trends, or how'd you say, innovative program strategies, things of that nature that you know are causing districts to, you know, turn heads, as it were, so to speak.
Actually, the team that we chose is AE3 Partners and Steinberg Architects, and Steinberg is probably the number 4 architectural firm that does education programming and planning in the country. So they're very well versed and very competent and capable in assisting us. And AE3 Partners is a local firm that specializes in educational programming and master planning as well. And they are, I believe they're currently on the LA Unified Expansion Program. So they've been, I believe, there for the last 4 or 5 years. So in terms of bandwidth and depth of knowledge, they've worked with some pretty large districts and have done some very creative things with districts that are cash strapped or have challenges very similar to ours. So I'm expecting that team to bring their best game forward for us in terms of looking at strategies to help us, you know, address some of the things that you're specifically talking about, and looking at programming, how you match the spaces to support the programming when you have limited funds, and how you can look at public-private partnerships and how those play into how we grow and ebb and flow with the changes that we're expecting to anticipate. So
for future meetings, and also because time is exhausted, let's discuss the thoughts on future meeting topics, and then put the discussion of those meeting topics at the next meeting. But I appreciate that response, Kelly. It seems like it fits, you know, so I would call it programmatic considerations list. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Brian, I assume you have a written out list that you'll be sharing with Kelly and I.
Yes, and I added that Liz's
Cool. Awesome.
comment to that.
All right. All right. So I think that's it for now. Time has exhausted. So if anybody has any other meeting topics, I would ask them to extend for time. Otherwise, let me give it a few seconds. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and have a great rest of your evening.
have a great week, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.